headlines of the world, Ukraine dominates. Gaza commands attention. But in the heart of Africa, a nation bleeds in silence. Where famine devours millions, where children feast on rats to survive, and where aid cannot penetrate the shadows of war. This is Sudan, a country vanishing beneath the weight of forgotten suffering, where the world's silence thunders louder than bombs. For 2 relentless years, civil war has torn Sudan apart with unprecedented savagery. While global attention fixates on distant conflicts, Sudan's agony unfolds in darkness, a humanitarian catastrophe hidden beneath the weight of international indifference. The violence is staggering in its brutality. The Sudanese army and RSF rebels have unleashed a campaign of terror marked by indiscriminate killings, mass displacement, and systematic atrocities that defy comprehension. Rape, torture, and executions have become weapons of war. Civilians trapped in the crossfire find themselves with nowhere to flee and no voice to cry out for help. Entire communities vanish overnight, swallowed by violence or scattered to the winds. As bullets tear through towns and cities, a more insidious killer follows in their wake: hunger. In some regions, survival has descended to eating rats and scavenging leaves. This is not merely warfare, it is the systematic collapse of human dignity. Over 1 million people have fled the carnage, many seeking refuge in the Nuba Mountains, a highland sanctuary in Sudan's heartland. For years, this region has maintained semi-autonomous status, largely insulated from the political chaos that consumes the rest of the nation. Here, desperate families arrive carrying nothing but hope for survival, but the Nuba Mountains offer only a different kind of devastation. One that does not roar like gunfire but gnaws with silent persistence. Starvation, abandonment, and the suffocating quiet of a world that is turned away. The territory falls under the control of the SPLMN, a rebel movement governing in the absence of central authority. Here, roads dissolve into dust, electricity remains a memory, and running water exists only in dreams. Medical facilities, if they ever existed, have long since crumbled into the unforgiving earth. Yet amid this desolation, the Nuba Mountains pulse with a fragile heartbeat. This land has become a sanctuary not because it overflows with life, but because it contains less death. Neutral in the broader conflict, the Nuba people have managed to shield their valleys from the worst violence. It is not peace in any true sense, but it is respite. At Al-Hilu camp, the displaced continue to arrive, families who have walked for days or weeks with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Their faces are hollowed by exhaustion, their eyes still wide with horrors that defy description. The local church, modest and weathered, has transformed into a lifeline, part sanctuary, part shelter, part beacon of hope in an ocean of despair. But even here, relief remains elusive. No food convoys navigate these forgotten roads, no international aid reaches these remote valleys. The outside world, consumed by politics or paralyzed by neglect, has averted its gaze. The people wait endlessly, for food, for medicine, for help that never arrives. This is Sudan's reality, a nation in collapse where the loudest suffering echoes in the quietest corners, where war starves and silence kills, where survival is no longer about living but about enduring one more day. The war in Sudan has unleashed one of Earth's most devastating humanitarian crises. Over 12 million people have been torn from their homes, scattered across a fractured landscape in search of safety that does not exist. More than 30 million souls, half the entire population, desperately need food and humanitarian assistance. Yet almost none of that aid penetrates to the places where it is needed most. In the remote interior of the Nuba Mountains, the crisis sharpens into something nearly unthinkable. No convoys traverse these broken roads, no relief missions brave the isolation, no global spotlight illuminates the suffering, only a flickering will to survive remains. Amid this silent emergency, one woman stands as a solitary beacon of hope. Nafisa, a nurse who fled the violence herself just 1 year ago, now serves as the sole medical lifeline for over 5,000 people crammed into the camp. She is not a doctor, she is a mother, a war survivor, a woman with nothing but determination and a single box of basic first aid supplies. With only bandages, antiseptic, and fever tablets, she confronts an ocean of need with a teaspoon of resources. Each day brings new patients, a woman with swollen legs from untreated infections and chronic malnutrition, children whose pencil-thin limbs and distended bellies signal severe malnutrition, families with no money, no food, and no way out. The signs of starvation multiply daily. Children sit listlessly in whatever shade they can find, their young bodies bearing the unmistakable markers of severe malnutrition, the kind that stunts growth, steals futures, and too often ends lives. Their mothers spend hours walking in scorching heat, searching for anything edible as regional supplies dwindle toward nothing. When the rainy season arrives in the Nuba Mountains, entire regions become completely cut off for months. Roads transform into rivers of impassable mud. Travel becomes impossible. Aid, if it ever comes, cannot penetrate the isolation. In this absolute separation from the outside world, famine deepens its grip. Already 2 areas in the Nuba Mountains have been officially declared in famine. Others teeter on the precipice. This crisis is not approaching. It has arrived and is tightening its stranglehold with each passing day. Dozens of makeshift camps scatter across the hills and bush, offering fragile shelter to waves of people fleeing the war. At Uru Camp, local leader Eunice oversees the care of over 3,200 people, most of whom have arrived within the past year. But she has no food to distribute, no supplies to offer, only strength and structure in a place where both are evaporating. People consume whatever they can locate. Children proudly display plates of roasted rats, a rare source of protein in a landscape where even wild roots and leaves are disappearing. For many, this represents the only meat they will taste in weeks. No regular food supply exists, no relief trucks navigate these forgotten roads, no outside support materializes, only endurance remains. Still, more arrive each day. Medina appeared just last night, clutching her infant son. They possessed nothing, no bags, no blankets, only the clothes they wore and the searing memory of what they had abandoned. Her husband, once a soldier in Sudan's army, was killed before their child drew his first breath. Now she stands alone in an unfamiliar camp, hoping desperately that this place might prove safer than the last. But she is not alone in her desperation. Thousands, tens of thousands share her story. Families torn apart by violence, children born into hunger, lives carried across scorched terrain in search of peace that seems to retreat with every step forward. The rebel authorities controlling the Nuba Mountains assert that the Sudanese government deliberately blocks humanitarian aid, refusing access, severing the flow of food and medicine, tightening the siege around a people already starving. Whether driven by politics, neglect, or military strategy, the result remains unchanged, an unfolding humanitarian catastrophe hidden in plain sight. The Sudanese government denies these accusations, issuing official statements that paint a picture of openness and cooperation, but on the ground, reality speaks with a voice that drowns out political rhetoric. Few aid organizations operate in this region, and those brave enough to try tread carefully, knowing that if they offer too much assistance in rebel-held areas, they risk expulsion from the rest of Sudan entirely. The stakes are insurmountable, and most aid organizations simply stay away. A day's treacherous drive from the main camp stands one of only 2 functioning hospitals in the entire Nuba region. The journey itself is an ordeal across rough terrain and broken paths, through a haunting silence that stretches for miles. But upon arrival, the scope of the crisis becomes impossible to ignore. Evidence of catastrophe permeates every corner of the facility. The malnutrition ward has expanded far beyond its original walls. What was once a small corner designated for undernourished children has become an entire wing, reconfigured and expanded to handle the surge in cases. Still, they lack sufficient space. Overflow beds line hallways. Mothers sit on bare concrete floors, cradling babies whose ribs press visibly through translucent skin. Dr. Tom Katina, who has operated this hospital for nearly 2 decades, stands as one of only 3 permanent doctors serving a region containing over 4 million people. That translates to 1 doctor for more than 1 million lives, a mathematical impossibility that grows more crushing with each passing day. Since the end of the last rainy season, when roads finally became passable again, the hospital has been inundated. Families isolated for months flooded in, carrying children barely clinging to life. Malnutrition cases have tripled compared to normal seasonal patterns. They were already overwhelmed, and that was last year. This year threatens to be catastrophically worse. Many farmers planted nothing at all this season. The few who possessed seeds from the previous harvest were too desperate to wait for a future crop. Instead of sowing hope, they consumed their only chance at tomorrow's survival. In times of peace, northern Sudan's farmers cultivated vast areas, producing food not only for themselves but for neighboring regions. But with war raging, cultivation has ceased entirely. Supply routes have collapsed. Entire food systems have disintegrated. In the malnutrition ward, medical charts tell stories of silent suffering. Red zones mark severe acute malnutrition. Yellow indicates moderate cases. Green, once common, has become rare. The numbers are devastating. A 6-month-old baby weighing just under 4 kilograms. Another child over 18 months old weighing less than 5. These statistics are not mere numbers, they are silent screams for help echoing through empty halls. The hospital depends on high-calorie therapeutic food, specially designed packets that can rescue children from the brink of starvation. But even this critical lifeline is dwindling. Stores run dangerously low. Rationing has begun, though the next shipment is not expected for months. With each passing day, more children arrive hungrier and weaker than the last. What unfolds in the Nuba Mountains is not simply a side effect of war. It is the predictable consequence of abandonment, of global silence, of decisions made in distant capitals that trickle down in the form of hunger and preventable death. This is a war the world barely reports, a famine quietly growing in a forgotten corner of Africa. Yet the need here is overwhelming, unquestionable, urgent, and fundamentally human. Every corridor of this struggling hospital tells a story. A mother who walked for days to save her child. A doctor who refuses to leave even when there is almost nothing left to give. A country unraveling while the world looks away. 17 years. That is how long some have remained steadfast in these mountains. Through uprisings, through war, through long silent stretches of suffering. But this crisis surpasses all previous catastrophes. Even during the 5 brutal years of civil war that once ravaged this land, the hunger did not cut this deep. The desperation was not this widespread. Then, there was conflict, but there was also resilience and support. Now, only slow, suffocating silence remains. Food insecurity has devoured the region. Basic supplies have nearly vanished, and with each passing day, more people slip into starvation. International aid, those powerful engines of relief that respond to disasters elsewhere, remain largely absent. The world has rallied for Ukraine. It has wept for Gaza. It has marched for justice in other lands. But here, in the Nuba Mountains, where wounds are equally raw, the silence is deafening. This is a quiet famine, a neglected war, a forgotten people. In the camps, hunger is not a temporary hardship. It is a way of life. Mothers like Zara spend every waking hour searching for work, performing manual labor and domestic chores, earning barely $2 on good days. That meager sum must feed 6 mouths, creating impossible mathematics. 1 meal or none, medicine or a handful of flour. Every mother in the camps faces the same cruel calculations. The trauma these women carry defies comprehension. Many have witnessed horrors no human should endure. Husbands executed before their eyes, their own lives threatened by the silence that follows violence. Some were warned that even grief would be punished, that crying out would result in their own death. So they swallowed their screams, internalized their pain, and fled with nothing but their lives. But there is no time to mourn, no space to process what has been lost. When survival becomes your only task, healing becomes an unaffordable luxury. These women wake each day not to grieve but to search for food, to care for children, to keep one step ahead of complete collapse. Behind closed doors, Nafisa also counsels women who have survived the unthinkable. Many come to her whispering stories of rape, deliberate, organized, systematic sexual violence. Survivors describe a clear pattern, Nuba women being specifically targeted, rape being used not merely as an act of violence but as a weapon of war designed to destroy identity, dignity, and community. Under international law, if proven, this constitutes genocide. But legal definitions carry little weight here. The war has stolen more than food and homes. It has stolen childhood itself. Nearly 17 million children across Sudan are now out of school, displaced, orphaned, or forced into survival labor. Many face the risk of trafficking. Others vanish into the shadows, sold, exploited, or lost to war's insatiable appetite for innocence. This transcends a humanitarian crisis. It represents the collapse of an entire generation. Amid the silence of suffering and the desolate expanse of the Nuba Mountains, one place stands as a modest sanctuary carved from pure compassion. Our Father's Cliff, a church-funded boarding school and children's home where the mission is simple but the responsibility is immense. To offer love, stability, and education to children who have lost everything. But with each passing day, calls for help multiply. More parents, barely surviving themselves, send desperate pleas. More orphans arrive at camp gates with vacant eyes and empty stomachs. The school, already stretched beyond its capacity, struggles under the weight of overwhelming need. Ezekiel Ayob, the school's quietly determined director, carries this burden with unwavering resolve. When he ventures to Debi Camp, one of the largest, most overcrowded displacement sites in the region, he searches for the most vulnerable children, those who have no one left to protect them. In the camp, Ezekiel is immediately surrounded by dozens of desperate caregivers, many with children clinging to their sides. Every face tells a story of loss. Every mother or guardian carries the same desperate question: will you take them? One woman steps forward with 3 children she has cared for since war destroyed their village. She knows nothing of their parents' fate, whether they were killed, captured, or lost in the chaos. She knows only that these children need more than she can provide. The selection process is heartbreaking. From the sea of need, Ezekiel can rescue only a few: a brother and sister named Shamir and her sibling, children too young to understand the magnitude of change but old enough to feel its weight. Days later, the transformation is remarkable. At our father's cliff, dusty classrooms buzz with energy. Chalk dust clings to blackboards. Laughter weaves between lessons. In the midst of it all, new arrivals sit quietly, absorbing their dramatically changed world. Little Shamir, wide-eyed and cautious, attends her first lesson alongside other girls her age. Across the corridor, 13-year-old Ahmed stands confidently at the front of his class, practicing his English alphabet with a small smile. Days ago, he lived in a camp filled with hunger and despair. Today, he spells out hope letter by letter. The school welcomes students between ages 5 and 20. Many bear deep psychological and physical scars. Some survived bombings. Others lost limbs. 2 are former child soldiers. Boys who once held rifles in Darfur now hold pencils instead. For Ezekiel, this work is, well, deeply personal. He survived years of war himself and really understands the darkness these children carry. At our father's cliff, teachers are trained to be more than just educators. They become second mothers, fathers, anchors in the storm. The school now shelters over 430 pupils. Here, they receive 3 meals daily, something that's honestly virtually unheard of in the camps. They sleep under roofs that do not leak. They sit at desks. They draw with crayons. They speak of dreams, of becoming doctors, teachers, pilots. Here, they're safe from trafficking, from forced labor, from the predators who roam conflict zones under the cover of impunity. But you know, this small sanctuary represents merely a drop in a vast ocean of need. Hundreds of thousands of children across Sudan still wait for food, for safety, for someone to care. For the children not chosen, for the thousands Ezekiel cannot accommodate, the future looms like a closing door. Their options are brutally simple: starvation or slavery. There is no third path, no safe escape, just a cruel narrowing of possibilities that honestly, no child should ever face. The desperation is suffocating, palpable in every interaction. Empty tents mark where lives once existed. Elderly people who died alone, starved, forgotten. No ambulances respond to these deaths. No outcry follows. No funeral processions honor the dead. Only silence remains and a vacancy where a human life once flickered. With Western powers like the United States and United Kingdom slashing aid budgets, the future grows even darker. The war has faded from international headlines. Sudan's suffering has slipped beneath the global radar. There is just, well, no meaningful international will to help, no pressure on the Sudanese government to act, and really no momentum to bring aid or peace. The people here, mothers like Nafisa, children like Ahmed, are, forced to carry the burden alone, starving, hoping, waiting. This is not merely famine, this is abandonment on a global scale. The world has unfortunately turned away from Sudan's agony, choosing to focus elsewhere while millions suffer in silence. Sudan's tragedy serves as a mirror held up to our world, a place where suffering without cameras becomes suffering without consequence, where silence buries the cries of millions. In the dust and shadow of war, people continue to fight, to live, to protect, to hope against impossible odds. The question is not simply how they survive in such conditions. The question is why the world allowed them to be forgotten in the first place. Sudan burns while the world watches something else. In this forgotten corner of Africa, humanity's capacity for both cruelty and compassion plays out in stark relief. The silence that surrounds their suffering speaks volumes about our global priorities and the selective nature of international compassion. Yet in this darkness, lights still flicker. In the dedication of healers like Nafisa, in the resilience of survivors like Ahmed, in the compassion of protectors like Ezekiel. These are the voices that refuse to be silenced, the hearts that continue beating despite the world's indifference. Their stories demand to be heard, their suffering demands acknowledgement, their humanity demands justice. The world may have forgotten Sudan, but Sudan remembers the world's silence, and in that silence, the true measure of our collective humanity is revealed. In the 21st century, in an age of unprecedented global connection and unimaginable wealth, famine should not exist. Yet here it thrives, not because resources are scarce, but because attention is selective. The same satellites that beam images of distant galaxies to our screens cannot seem to focus on the children of Sudan who are disappearing one empty belly at a time. The arithmetic is simple and devastating. While the world spends billions on entertainment, defense, and luxury, the cost of feeding every malnourished child in the Nuba Mountains would barely register as a rounding error in any major nation's budget. This is not about capability, it is about priority. It is about what we choose to see and what we choose to ignore. Sudan's crisis exposes, an uncomfortable truth about our interconnected world, that geography still determines dignity, that proximity to power still determines protection, and that the color of suffering still determines the volume of our compassion. But this story need not end in silence. Every tragedy contains within it the seed of transformation. Every moment of abandonment carries the potential for redemption. The children at our father's cliff prove that hope can flourish even in the harshest soil. The dedication of healers like Nafisa, really demonstrates that love can persist even when the world looks away. Sudan's war will eventually end. Its children will eventually grow. Its land will eventually heal. The question that will echo through history is not whether these things will happen, but whether the world will choose to be present for Sudan's healing, or whether it will, continue to perfect the art of looking away. In the silence of the Nuba Mountains, millions wait not just for food or medicine, but for the simple acknowledgement that their lives matter. That acknowledgement honestly begins with bearing witness to their story. Thank you for watching today's travel experience. Remember, wherever life takes you, home isn't just a place, it's a perspective. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Your curiosity makes these stories possible, so keep exploring, keep dreaming, and we'll see you in the next adventure right here on Beyond Borders. Like, comment, and subscribe to get updated on any current travel documentary.